Welcome back into the Fantasy Football Fellas YouTube channel. My name is Lucas Wenzel, and today we're talking 5 running backs that you need to stop drafting in fantasy football this year. Before we get started, if you haven't subscribed to the channel already, make sure you do that now. Turn on those notifications so you know when new episodes are up daily. We're literally posting short videos every day, videos like this, weekly podcasts. And if you're a returning subscriber, hey, we're really grateful for you. But if you haven't turned on those notifications yet, make sure you go and do that because like new subscribers, you will be alerted when all of our new daily videos are up. Now, I don't want to keep you waiting any longer. Let's dive into the 5 running backs that you need to stop drafting this year, starting with Travis Etienne. Now, I'm going to catch a lot of lashback on that one. I know there's a lot of Etienne truthers out there. I can't buy into it. I even admittedly flip-flop daily on Travis Etienne, but Doug Peterson, first and foremost, he needs to stop playing mind games with me first, okay? Back at the NFL Combine in March, Doug Peterson says this: I think in today's game, you've got to have 2 to 3 guys. They've got to be able to carry the load. You're talking about an 18-week, 17-game schedule and the postseason. It's wear and tear on your guys. We haven't seen enough Snoop Conner yet either, but hey, we like Snoop Conner. We know what Jermichael can do. We obviously know what Etienne can do. So yeah, you're always looking to have 2, 3, 4 guys that can work in the rotation. Seems fitting to what we know about Doug Peterson. But now less than a week ago, Doug Peterson says this: there's that skill and ability to anticipate a hole. We always talk about speed through the hole and not to a hole type of thing. And Travis Etienne has really embraced that this training camp. That, to me, is the next step for him. And once 1,100, 1,200, 1,300 yards start creeping up, maybe, eventually, he's pushing 1,600 to 1,700 yards as a rusher. So, Doug, which is it, man? Which is it? Do you need to take the load off of Travis Etienne? Or is he going to be a workhorse 1,700-yard rusher this year? Now, I want to dissect these quotes just a little bit before I dive into the more analytical portion of Travis Etienne. Now, I think Doug Peterson's first quote means a lot more than his second quote, mostly because nowhere in the second quote did he say that we're looking to have Travis Etienne be a 1,700-yard rusher this year. He quite literally used the words maybe, eventually. That to me would indicate a not 2023 kind of a thing for Travis Etienne. And the first quote actually affirms what we know of Doug Peterson. I mentioned that just a few moments ago, right? He really likes solid depth in his running back room. So what did they do? The Jags went out. They signed Dearness Johnson this offseason. They went out and they spent valuable draft capital on Hank Bigsby, aggressive downhill runner out of Auburn. Does a lot of great things if you watch his film. But I'm also not going to sit here and tell you that either of those guys are like better than Travis Etienne. I think we all know that, right? He's one of 6 players in history to receive a 99 draft grade per Next Gen Stats coming out of college. That is elite. He was first in yards before contact per attempt last year per our friends over at Matthew Berry's Fantasy Life. Go check out their website if you haven't, y'all. They just updated it. They have a ton of great analytical resources for you all to dive into to see how players performed last year. There's a lot of great metrics on there that you all need to go check out. So fantasylife.com, you can go check that out. He's a great pass catcher too. He's super efficient with his touches, right? But all my questions around Travis Etienne, they stem from his workload opportunity. People will say like, oh, his pass catching work can go up. I don't think it has much room to go up though. His 7.1% target share last year, that was 31st amongst running backs. Added Calvin Ridley this offseason too. Calvin Ridley needs his targets. Trevor Lawrence, he had the lowest checkdown rate last year at only 3.4%. That was tied for the lowest with Jalen Hurts, who we're also going to talk about later. And reports out of camp make it sound like Tank has actually been fairly surprising in the pass catching games, and he's been performing really well in that regard. Less opportunity for Travis Etienne potentially. Doug Peterson has called Tank Bigsby a sponge. He's soaking everything up. Travis Etienne, only 5 total touchdowns last year as well. That's concerning. He was 9th in red zone touches, so maybe there's opportunity for that to go up. But Tank, as I mentioned earlier, Tank's profile is more of the downhill bruising back, and I think he's more likely to handle the goal line work than Travis Etienne is. And the Jags, they like to throw it around the goal line too. T-Law, he was 8th in both pass attempts inside of the 20 and 10-yard lines last year. Not an astounding number by any means, but 80-plus pass attempts inside of the 20, 30-plus inside of the 10. They'll throw around the goal line. They aren't afraid to do that. So Etienne he's quite literally going as a borderline running back 1 right now. He's going as the running back 13. And even though he finished 2022 strong, he was a full-time starter, finished out strong. I just think so many things have to go right for him to be this top 12 lock that people so desperately want him to be. All the guys that I'd rather have going in the same range, Najee Harris, he's going one pick ahead of Travis Etienne. I'd rather have Najee Harris, Jahmyr Gibbs going right around that range too. I would much rather take a shot on the explosive rookie. If any of like Chris Olave, Devonta Smith, T. Higgins are falling in that range, I would much rather scoop one of those three up. He's just going in such this gross part of drafts right now that I think I would rather wait to find value on running back later than force myself into taking a running back who I think is being drafted closer to his ceiling than not right now. Let's move on to our next running back that you should really stop drafting right now, and it's Ken Walker III. I really want to like Ken Walker this year. I so badly do, but I just don't think I can get behind him. Running back 15. That's his price tag right now. That's still too rich for me. I love his fit in the Seattle offense. Oh my gosh, I love his fit. Evaded 79 tackles last year. He had a 31% juke rate. He was 8th in breakaway run rate and 3rd in total breakaway runs. He was tied for the running back 10 in fantasy points per game from week 5 on when he took over last year as well. But honestly, I think that's where my pessimism starts to come into play. I list all those nice stats, but the running back 10 in fantasy points per game from when he was a starter, that's where my pessimism kicks in. As much as I love Ken Walker's fit, we can't ignore the Seahawks spent valuable second-round draft capital on Zach Charbonnet, who I had as my 3rd best running back prospect coming out of the class behind only Bijan and Jahmyr Gibbs. That's valuable capital they spent on Charbonnet. And you don't just do that to draft a 3rd down pass-catching back for your team. You don't do that. You could have spent that capital on somebody else and gone later in the draft if you really just wanted a pass-catching back. And like Zach Charbonnet's forte, he's good at pass-catching, but that's not his bread and butter. Zach Charbonnet does a lot of things well, but he's not a purely 3rd down back. He's not a Jahmyr Gibbs type of player. And if we knew Ken Walker would be more utilized in the passing attack, like I'd be more okay with his running back 15 ADP. But we're talking about a guy who didn't even touch 30 targets last year as the lead back in Seattle's offense. So if Charbonnet is like chipping into his carries and probably going to take a small chunk of Ken Walker's targets as well, like we're looking at a one-trick pony who needs to have insane efficiency and 10-plus rushing touchdowns to hopefully finish inside of the top 15. I just think they're going to use Zach Charbonnet more than we expect. I think I initially was a little too pessimistic on Ken Walker, but still, the running back 15, that is too rich for me, especially with the guys going around him. Jahmyr Gibbs, Keenan Allen, Aaron Jones. Joe Mixon I'd rather have ahead of Ken Walker. Lamar Jackson, Justin Fields, I'd rather scoop my elite quarterback than take a shot on Ken Walker. Those are all guys I'd rather have over Ken Walker right now. I absolutely love the player. I love the fit in Seattle, but they just did not do him any favors this offseason. I just can't buy into him as a running back 15 right now, and I don't really think you should be either. Next player. This is going to give me some Travis Etienne level lashback. You got to stop drafting Dameon Pierce at the running back 19. I don't understand this one. I really don't. I have appointed myself president of the anti-Dameon Pierce fan club for fantasy football in 2023, and I am just continuously baffled by the amount of hype he's getting going into this year. Now, to be clear, let me state this first. I was banging the drum for Dameon Pierce all last off season. From the night he was drafted, I said, Dameon Pierce, he's got to be a guy you can have in fantasy football this year. He was one of my favorite prospects coming out, and he had the easiest path to lead back duties in Houston, right? And for the most part, he delivered, right? 4th in rushing yards after contact, 2nd in broken tackles. He was 5th in carries. All these were while he was healthy last year, of course. But even though he's a tough runner, and he seems to have this it factor, right? Like, a lot of people want to get behind Dameon Pierce because, man, you know what? He looks explosive. He has that it factor, but I don't think having it is enough. Rarely is it ever enough. He averaged only 4.0 true yards per carry last year. He only averaged 4.4 yards per touch. He was 67th in fantasy points per opportunity last year. That is a number amongst all running backs in the NFL. There were 2 teams worth of starting running backs who averaged more fantasy points per opportunity than Dameon Pierce last year. And I know people hate this next argument. I can already hear the people, Devin Singletary, he's not that good. But we can't discount the impact of Devin Singletary. We just can't. In games where Dameon Pierce saw 20 plus touches last year, he averaged 16.8 fantasy points per game. That's a pretty good number. But in games where he saw less than 20 touches, 8.3 fantasy points per game, half. He saw half the amount of fantasy points in games with 20 less touches. Devin Singletary comes in. Dameon Pierce ain't hitting 20 touches in most games this year. Sub 10 fantasy points per game potentially. I'm not going to say it's going to be exactly the same, but that concerns me. That concerns me. And speaking, I didn't even bring up the fact that they're going to be behind in enough ball games where Dameon Pierce isn't going to have the opportunity to, get 20 touches while Devin Singletary gets 12, 13, right? Like they're going to be behind in too many ball games to feed that many rushing attempts too. And so if they're going to be behind in ball games, that they're going to have to throw the ball more. And Devin Singletary's role in the passing game, sneaky good throughout the past 3 years. He ran 296 routes last year. That was 8th most amongst running backs. He's seen 50 or more targets in each of the past 3 years. So if you're banking on receiving work for Dameon Pierce, right? Like Dameon Pierce got a little bit of a role in the pass catching game, nothing elite, but he had a nice little share last year. If you're banking on like receiving work for Dameon Pierce going up as he continues to get better, and if you think he's going to be the lead guy, like I think Singletary chips into not only his rushing volume, but I think he out-targets Dameon Pierce this year. And I'd be surprised if Dameon Pierce does get anywhere near 40, 45 targets again this year. So we're looking at Dameon Pierce as running back 19 on Sleeper right now. I'd rather have Miles Sanders going in the same range. I'd rather have Alexander Mattison, Cam Akers, 2 more running backs. I'd rather draft Jerry Jeudy in that range. I think depending on the build of my team, I might rather have DJ Moore as well. That's a maybe. You could totally debate me on that one, but depending on the build of my team, if I need wide receivers, I might look DJ Moore in that range as well. So if the Texans, if they hadn't brought in, excuse me, I didn't like half burp there. If they hadn't brought in anybody else, we'd be having a totally different conversation right now. I'd probably be in on Dameon Pierce this year. But I just don't think forcing Dameon Pierce between the tackles week in and week out with Devin Singletary in town, I just don't think that has a recipe to return on the running back 19 ADP. I just think there's too much going against Dameon Pierce. No matter how much I like him, no matter how much I like the player, the situation just does not bode well for him. And I think his breakout will be hindered this year. And I think you should probably stop drafting him as a running back 19. Next player. This one makes me sad because I love DeAndre Swift. I loved him on the Detroit Lions. But I just can't come up with an argument favoring him as a running back 21 in drafts right now. I can't fathom doing that. I know he's been top 15 in fantasy points per game every single year of his career. I know he's been top 5 in fantasy points per opportunity 2 of the past 3 years. And I know he got traded to the Eagles, who have one of the best rush attacks in the NFL. But what if I told you I actually don't think the Eagles are all that good of a landing spot for him? I'm not going to debate efficiency. You probably heard me talk about this on our most recent podcast with Alex Caruso. I won't, they averaged 4.6 yards per carry last year. I don't think Swift will have issues finding holes in that offensive line, getting a few breakaway runs in there. But my concern for Swift is that he was on pace to see 85 plus targets each of the past 2 seasons. And Jalen Hurts, get this, he only checked down 16 times last year. That check down rate was 3.4%. I mentioned that with Trevor Lawrence earlier. Again, tied for lowest in the NFL. Checkdowns in general, lowest in the NFL. Not great. If Swift doesn't get a good load of receiving work, that's going to severely impact his fantasy value. The other concern I have for Swift, while yes, the Eagles will be in scoring position fairly often, I think Swift might be 3rd in line, 4th in line for goal line opportunities. I mean, he's never seen more than 32 red zone rushing opportunities in a season. Now, it could be in part because the Lions were a fairly bad offense before 2022, but let's also not pretend that Jalen Hurts, Rashad Penny, dare I even say Boston Scott, are in line for goal line opportunities ahead of DeAndre Swift. You can maybe say 3rd behind Jalen Hurts with the tush push and Rashad Penny. I would accept that answer, but I think Boston Scott gets in there a little bit too, right? So while Swift may possess a ton of upside from a pure talent perspective, there's reports at training camp saying they're lining him up in the slot, they're getting him involved in the passing game plenty. Like, there's that upside there, but I think the floor is actually deeper than the ceiling. The floor is deeper than the height of the ceiling here, I think. And so drafting him as my running back 2 as a running back 21, I just can't fathom taking that kind of a risk at the running back position. I can't do that. The guy's going, again, Miles Sanders, Alexander Mattison, Cam Akers, 3 guys I would easily take ahead of DeAndre Swift right now. I think they all have much safer value. I think you're going to get far more consistency out of those guys. You might get like a 25-point game out of Swift some weeks, sure, but I also think there's some weeks that you're going to get a 4-point game out of Swift. Depends how much volatility you want. Frankly, at the running back position, that's not something I'm looking for from DeAndre Swift, especially at the running back 21. I just can't fathom that, the running back 21. We'll move on. We'll keep moving to our last guy here. I'm already 15 minutes in. I don't know why I have to talk about this next one. Why is Dalvin Cook going as a running back 23? You need to stop drafting him. He isn't even on an NFL team right now. Like, why are we drafting him? Well, I get there's the potential he lands in a really good spot. We don't know where he's landing. He might not play football for half of the NFL, for the entire NFL. We don't know. We don't know. We know nothing about Dalvin Cook right now. For Dalvin to be worth it as the running back 23, we have to know for sure that he is going to land on a team like the Bills or the Dolphins. We have to know that. We don't know that. You could even make the argument for the Jets, but I think if he does go to the Jets, he's splitting 50-50 with Breece Hall, and even despite coming off of an ACL tear, I would actually go to bat that Breece Hall is the better running back than Dalvin Cook, even off of an ACL tear at this point in their careers. You can debate me on that. Maybe that's a hot take. I don't know. I think Breece Hall is still the better running back coming off of an ACL than Dalvin Cook is at both points in their careers. Now, in New England, if he goes to New England, that's definitely not happening. There's even reports saying New England isn't pursuing him, but let's be honest, that offense is not high-powered enough to support 2 top 24 running backs in both Dalvin Cook and Ramondre Stevenson. That's just not happening at all. Turn on your listening ears, kids. Dalvin Cook is a declining asset. This is not the Dalvin Cook of old at all, whatsoever. He'll be 28 by the end of the regular season. That is the tipping point for elite fantasy running backs. His yards per carry has dropped for the 3rd straight year in 2022. 5, 4.7, 4.4. He's on a steady decline. He averaged only 14 fantasy points per game last year, which in your mind might be like, ooh, that was pretty good. That was the 2nd lowest of his career. My guess is that continues to decline this year. His breakaway run rate, ready for this, went from 4th best in the league in 2021 to 30th last year. He lost that explosiveness. He only evaded 62 tackles in 2022 in a full 17-game season, might I remind you. He evaded 73 in 2021 while playing only in 13 games, and ready for this, in 2020 he played 14 games. 102 evaded tackles. He's not the same running back anymore. This is not the same dude from 2 years ago, and the NFL knows it. That's why nobody has gone out and thrown them dollar bills at Dalvin Cook. Nobody has stepped up to the plate to pay him yet. You also wonder why all the noise about who Dalvin's going to sign with is coming right from Dalvin Cook. The Jets. The Jets really want me. Oh, you know what? I really wouldn't mind going to play in Buffalo with my brother, James Cook. All the noise is coming from the guy who the NFL does not want to pay. The NFL knows Dalvin Cook is not the same running back. You need to accept that as well. Let me list all the guys I would rather take instead of Dalvin Cook right now. Mostly because these dudes are on an NFL team and Dalvin Cook is not. I would rather have Cam Akers. All these guys are going after Dalvin Cook, by the way. I would rather have Cam Akers. I would much rather have James Conner. I would much rather have Alvin Kamara, who now, hey, remember when I said his suspension probably wasn't going to be 6 games and that your league mates were overlooking him because they were playing chicken? I mentioned that in the 8 players that your league mates are overlooking video. You remember that? I just want to take a little bit of a victory lap there. But I would much rather have Alvin Kamara. I'd rather have Rachaad White, admittedly. I'd rather have David Montgomery. All these guys are going after Dalvin Cook. They are signed to teams, and they have a solidified role in their offense. We know none of that for Dalvin Cook. So why are we drafting him as a running back 2? A running back 2. This is a dude who you are plugging into your starting lineup with where he is being drafted right now in a 12-man league. That makes zero sense. He is not on an NFL team. If he goes to the Patriots, if he goes to, let's say, the Browns, you're screwed. If he signs with any team that won't utilize him effectively, if they'll use him as a running back 2, you're screwed. You're screwed. All those other guys I mentioned, they are solidified running back 1s in their offense, except for David Montgomery, but I like Monty's opportunity this year. I just cannot fathom drafting a dude who is not even on an NFL team as the RB23 right now. A starting running back in 12-man leagues. I can't fathom that. So stop drafting Dalvin Cook. That is it. Those are the 5 running backs I have for you all. Thanks for tuning into this video on the Fantasy Football Fellas YouTube channel. If you want our draft guide for 2023, fellasdraftguide.com, $10 over there. But if you want it for free, promo code Fellas and Underdog Fantasy, that will double your first deposit up to $100 and we'll give you that draft guide for free. That's it. Promo code Fellas and Underdog Fantasy, make a first time deposit. They'll double it up to $100. You'll get the draft guide for free. Easy as that. Easy as that. You can win a chance at $3 million over there as well. Best Ball Mania. Yeah. Make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel as well and turn on those notifications, both if you're new and returning to the channel. You'll be alerted when new episodes are up. And hey, if you want to give us a follow on Twitter as well, FFFellas. Not even Twitter, it's called X now. X. I don't like that. Freaking Elon. FFFellas over on X. Make sure to go give us a follow over there as well. Thanks for tuning in. Again, I'm at Lucas Wenzel on Twitter. We will see you all this week with a podcast episode and another YouTube video later in the week. 5 wide receivers you must draft in fantasy football this year. We will see you all then.